Acquiring a business or being acquired? All that and more on Think Business. Hi, I'm John Yeager, Managing Director of Business Transformation Services at Bennett Thrasher. Welcome to Think Business, where critical thinking equals growth and success. Today my guest is Charlie Dino, President and GM of AquireTek, a full-line acquisition integration company. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks, John, for having me.
Charlie, so tell me a little bit about what you do at AquireTek.
Yeah, so AquireTek, we are an acquisition integration company. We go in when somebody acquires a company, we'll go in after they put in a letter of intent for the acquisition, and we start to do an assessment. Then we do planning sessions with them and show them how you can do an execution of an integration in a more succinct and process-oriented way.
So help me understand, what do you mean by integration services? What's included in that?
Yeah, sure. So we go all the way from, we've done rebranding, communications to employees, HR, transition of systems and any type of processes that they might have. Same thing with financial systems and financial processes. And then we also start to get into the operational side of their business. So whatever they do, we'll move inventory if they need to, do facility conversions, and then we get into the systems and IT side as well, which is typically the foundation. It really goes across all functions.
Right.
But that is our basis of starting with them, and then we go into all of these other projects to make sure we do the full integration.
How did you get into this?
So funny is, I recently, before we started the company in May of 2018, I was with a company named Recall. It got acquired by a company named Iron Mountain. And I had done 21 acquisition integrations at Recall, and then Iron Mountain purchased us, and they asked me to do the acquisition integration at Iron Mountain. So the way we got into it is we were actually the client doing these integrations. And so what I've done is, out of the 20 plus people that we've brought aboard, a lot of those people, if not all of them, have had experience being the client, trying to do an integration whereby you've got your day job, you've got to do the integration. How did I do the integration? Did I like the way this works? Didn't like the way that worked. And so we've brought a lot of that thought leadership wise, and it's the reason we started the company, is we wanted to do things a little different than the others that are in the marketplace.
So it sounds like to me that there weren't really companies out there who are offering what you really needed at the company.
Yeah, there are companies out there that do integration work. My contention would be is there's a real gap between when a deal is actually being structured and put together and then integration. So what happens there is, and it makes sense, is that the team that's doing the acquisition due diligence, they go on to either the next acquisition or they go back to their day jobs.
Yep.
And there's a gap between that and the people that actually have to do the integration. And that's really where we start our process, to fill that gap, put some thought and process and planning around how the integration should go. And what that does, it actually brings more return on investment, because you get things done in a more planned, quality manner, and also you get them done quicker as well. We have use cases where we've shown that to be the case. After we do our planning, interestingly, in addition, other companies don't necessarily do this, we get down involved in the integration. So we assign somebody to be the senior success integration manager for that acquisition. And then at that point, we start to use our team along with subject matter experts from the business that made the acquisition to go ahead and set up an integration management office and then execute all the way through to the end of the integration.
The ones you were talking about were fairly large companies.
Yeah.
I would imagine this is applicable for companies of any size.
It is. So we've had instances of a $400 million acquisition that we were able to integrate in 13 months, down to 25 and 50,000 up to $1 million acquisitions with some of our clients.
What do you tend to see as the commonality amongst all sizes of companies? Obviously, the bigger may be a little more complex, but I would assume there's some commonalities as well.
Yeah, I'd say the commonality between the smaller acquisition integrations and the larger one is typically, with the smaller ones, you still want to plan, but there's definitely, we don't use every step in our process. We don't use everything within our toolkit.
Yep.
However, I would say a definite commonality is like data integration. So if you leave data from a system you acquired and a system that you have, typically what will start happening, it might not happen in the near future, but a couple years down the road, you'll start to have to add manual processes, potentially resources to get things done, and then your scalability starts to suffer from that. So I would say that's the commonality between the two. The larger acquisition integrations we've done, there's just a lot more as far as planning and process just because of the size.
For our viewers out there, there may be some that are going to go through an acquisition soon. When would they start thinking about working with somebody like you?
I would say once you're towards getting a letter of intent on the acquisition, that's the time to bring someone in like us, because we can start the assessment. And our assessment is really focused on, a little differently than others in our industry, it's focused on the systems that you're purchasing, the profitability of that company, and then also the processes and how those all come together. And the other thing we really talk about when we do our assessment with the company that's making the acquisition is don't assume that everything that you have is the way that it should go as far as the integration planning. And the reason for that is that when you make this acquisition, you're doing it for a reason, right? There's some reason you've acquired it. And if you go away from everything in that reasoning during the integration, you're going to start to erode what you bought it for, which will eventually lead to potentially clients leaving you.
So when you're talking to a company about a potential prospect, what do you think are the 2 or 3 key factors that are the biggest surprises or things that could potentially be pitfalls, I guess I should say, in this whole process?
Yeah, so one would be, the very first is, ensure that you're going to do an integration of the processes and the systems, because if you don't, there's a huge cost factor to that. So what'll happen is when you make the acquisition, you've got your synergy numbers, your EBITDA numbers that have been put forth. And a lot of times what'll happen is that you're very focused on those, which is great. That's definitely a part of it. It's a part of our process as well. But if you don't integrate properly or don't do it at all, there are hidden costs that'll come back later on. It might be 6 months down the road, it might be a year down the road, it might be longer. So the second one is an interesting one, and we really do a lot of thought leadership around it, which is typically within an acquisition, your synergies are going to come from real estate redundancy, resource redundancy, there's systems redundancies and the like, but the resource redundancy is very interesting because it's just a fact of it. But one thing that you want to make sure of is that there is a situation where you're going to release some of these people, and they get a package to leave. But what is that right timing? And if you do it too soon to get the synergy, then what happens again is there's a hidden cost to that, because a lot of that native knowledge leaves with the person. And so what happens is that actually extends the integration time as well. So it's something we really talk about. We're not saying that you don't get the resource synergy. Right. It's just make sure that when you get the resource synergy, it's the right timing so that you don't lose that institutional knowledge. So one of the things that we've started to do with our clients is really start to document that knowledge so that when that person is being moved along, that we actually have a lot of that documentation so that we don't lose that knowledge at the same time.
So going back to the first point, the kind of hidden cost of not integrating, what are some of those that you're, some examples of that would be the most apparent, that you've run across the most?
Yeah, so the first one would be around not doing a data integration. So what happens there is now you've got the potential of, let's say your customer service team, perfect example, is they're working out of 2 systems. So now when there is a problem with your client, they've got to go through 2 systems potentially. So your legacy client and your acquired client, and maybe you had both clients and it's one client and it was common amongst the 2. Now you've got customer service people and operations going in between 2 systems, which becomes very unproductive.
And then the second one, obviously, sensitivity around employees, right? This is not an easy time in the life of the company, certainly not the employees that are affected by this, and it starts all the way back at the acquisition, even before, as the word gets out. How do you work with HR and others to kind of help facilitate that process to, take care of people as best they possibly can be taken care of?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that we're passionate about is when we do our facilitation of our workshops up front, we're really bringing in both sides of the teams so that are going to work on the integration. So the team that is legacy and the team that was acquired. And the reason I mention this, get back to the people, is that's the first time they're meeting each other. And there's a lot of being nervous, not sure where their place in the world will be. And so one of the things we talk about as we're starting to facilitate that very first design workshop and doing some team building is we talk about, listen, you're both in this situation. The good news is you've been identified as subject matter experts. So you have a choice here. Your choice can be embrace this, do the best you possibly can, give all of the knowledge and all of the success that you can give to it. Or if you don't, what happens is that you don't become a part of the team and all your fears are realized.
Right.
So that's one of the things we talk to them about. The other thing we talk to HR and the C plus executives is that at the end of the day, there's also, back to a subject we talked about earlier, there's an assumption that the legacy employees should be kept versus the acquired employees. It's a thought leadership wise, we've been bringing to the table that it's a great time for you to look at talent potentially, and you're gonna get talent that you just acquired that you don't have to go out and maybe hire off the street, is you get that opportunity to look at that talent, see if maybe the redundancy is on your legacy side. Maybe you're getting a better talent with the acquired side.
There are winners and losers in an M&A deal. And when we're looking at an industry acquisition versus a private equity acquisition, does that have an impact on that as well? How do you see those two different as it relates to what we just talked about or any of the topics that we talked about?
Yeah, so they are different. They can be the same, so I'll just explain real quick. So in an industry acquisition, typically they have made an acquisition within industry for a purpose, right? Same thing in private equity, but there are instances in private equity that we've worked on where they've done a carve out. So, for the audience, what's a carve out? Basically, they've gone to like an Oracle, for example, and bought a software from them, and they've taken that software and they've started a company. So a little different. But there are instances where a private equity firm will go out and buy an entity within an industry. Now, all of those play the same way as an industry acquisition. Now, when private equity doesn't do that, or they do a smaller one, what we've started to do is we are approaching that just a little differently. And the way we're approaching it, there's a new product that we're putting out this year, and it's called Acquisition Concierge. And what it is we're coming to the private equity firms and saying to them, hey, listen, you guys focus on the acquisition, the financials, getting the deal done on your return, and we'll do the rest. And what does the rest mean? It really means the rest. So if they need us to, again, move inventory, set up facilities, set up their PCs, IT, et cetera, communications, HR will do all of that. It just depends on the size of it. That acquisition concierge, interestingly though, it's going to be for smaller acquisitions as well, because we have found, like in this wealth management space, potentially in smaller law firms, where they don't want to go through our entire process. They don't have the budget for us to come in. So what we're doing with them is we'll come in for a week or two, we'll show you what we do, we'll charge you a fee for 6 months, and you get access to myself and the team, and you get to ask us questions. We'll come out. If we start to come out too often, then we'll do a different deal with them. But it's something that we've heard from some of our clients that on the smaller deals, they'd rather have that.
And I could see in both industry and private equity in a roll-up situation, right? So a company is buying medical practices, or a PE firm is acquiring restaurant locations, those kind of things. So there might be a repeatable process that goes along with this.
Correct.
Is that an area you focus on as well, and trying to establish kind of what that repeatable process as they go through this roll-up practice?
We do. So that would be part of that acquisition concierge.
Yep.
But interestingly, you're right. So there are those repeatable, they do one a year, et cetera. And what happens there, and a thought leadership moment for us again in the market is they go it alone. They go and they do the integration themselves.
Yep.
And in talking to people in our network about it, I really didn't know what I was doing. And now they do through trial and error, but why go through that error? So that's why we wanted to bring this acquisition concierge and thought leadership to the market, is to say to those that are, maybe buying a restaurant once a year, or a wealth management firm, is, hey, we can help you. We'll just do a week. We'll charge you for that week to show you and your associates how to do it, and then you have access to us over a certain amount of time.
Gotcha. That's similar. We do a lot of technology deployment in the accounting technology space, right? And so we've done probably, together with my partners, 150 of these. And a client might go through one in a lifetime. So part of the message we talk about is, we know how to do this, we've done this a lot, let us do that. Is that similar to kind of message that you that you provide to your clients,
100%,
prospects?
100%. So you just hit on two of them that we typically, when we go out, we bring from a thought leadership perspective. One of them is that they've typically only done 1 or 0 integrations in their career, right? So that's the first. The second is, similar to what you're saying, is they typically have day jobs. And
right.
so it's something where, outsource for a long time, I know you know this, was not necessarily a very comforting word when you went out
right.
to clients, but now they're looking at it differently. And what I tell them when we come out, and I'm sure you guys do at Bennett Thrasher, is that, listen, you get to focus on your core competency now.
Right.
Let me focus on this. This is what I do all day.
Yes.
Just integration and acquisitions. So.
Absolutely. I mean, the outsourcing business in general is exploding.
Yes.
Some people are predicting, a downturn in the economy. Some people are not.
Yep.
But in either case, I think outsourcing is going to grow, and
Yep.
certainly finance, IT,
Yep.
those areas. HR, we've seen, is a growing space,
Yep.
and so it certainly sounds like you agree with that.
Absolutely. So one other space too, by the way, so we were talking about people and talent. What we've done at AquireTek, something that I've started to really bring to the table, is when we're out with a client, if they have an integration team, we start to talk about outsourcing there. And we've actually, in a couple cases, rebadged. So rebadging mean we actually hired them over to AquireTek. So I see the talent when we're out there. They're an integration entity within a company that's one of our clients. We approach the client to say, hey, would you like to outsource that for future acquisitions? If you do, we've got other work for them. And the importance to that is, for the client, is, hey, we're here when you need us as AquireTek. We're here as when you don't need us, so you don't
right.
have the overhead costs. So
another topic that kind of ties into all that is there's usually a lot of data floating around from lots of different places. Obviously, on our side, we deal with data integration, data mapping, all those kind of things. I would assume that's a big part of what you do.
It is. So we basically approach data in 2 ways. We have an information governance practice that actually goes through and makes sure that your data is secure. So we have processes around general data privacy rules, around retention, et cetera. But then we also, when your data comes across and you're trying to integrate it, we have a whole technology practice at AquireTek. And that technology practice, typically Gartner will tell you that on a first pass data integration or conversion, you'll get about 55 to 60% accuracy hit. We at AquireTek are hitting 85% on first pass. The second time we see a system, we're hitting 95 to 97%.
Anything else you'd like to add for our audience?
Just if you need help around, and we would bring a lot of thought leadership around acquisition integration and how to do that in a quality manner, easier and more planned, and get a better return on investment, you can find us at AquireTek.com, on LinkedIn, and also at AquireTek. We would love to talk to you and tell you how we do acquisition integration in an effective way.
Great, thank you. Thanks for being
Thanks
here.
for having me.
Absolutely, and you can find me on social media at John Yeager or at #ThinkBusiness. Have a great day.